Right, right. And thank you so much for sharing that, Zoya, because and I'm sure a lot of people would relate to your experience. I mean, I know I do because um sometimes when you think about it, it's not really fair to ask people to talk about like a whole region. Like they can talk about
Mm.
their own personal experience, but that does not necessarily mean that they represent the entire country, let alone the entire
Mm.
continent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because even for me personally, like I grew up in the capital city, went to a private school for girls, and like like my upbringing and what you talked about, about privilege and stuff, and then being able to attend Smith,
Yeah.
it's like a prestigious college, and
Yeah.
if you compare my life to a random girl's life in Ethiopia, it's completely different because
Right.
the majority of the population in Ethiopia, like more than 80%, lives in rural areas
Mhm.
where, the majority of them, especially if you're a girl, like,
Right.
having access to education is a privilege, and
Hmm.
having access to healthcare, like that's something that's like secondary, you know what I mean? And
Right.
so when you find yourself coming from, Ethiopia, or like, could be Pakistan, and then you
Hmm.
find yourself in a classroom or like in a situation where people are expecting you to talk about the entire nation, you feel a bit conflicted because I can't talk. Okay, I have an example. Okay, so I recently went to Europe for a work conference, and I was having
Mm.
this conversation with like an older gentleman, and I told him I'm from Ethiopia, and he was like, wow, you're from Ethiopia? Yes. And then I'm here for a conference for work, and it's like, wow. And then we talked, and he was like, like, even like he said he like made the summary, which was like, your life, the fact that you were able to get an education in the US, the fact that you're able to travel the world, the fact that you're here, um
Mm.
is a privilege, compared to someone who's in Ethiopia, who does not have the same level of access and privilege.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so that really made me think, and that is very true.
Mm.
But then when you find yourself in situations where people expect you to know everything about your country and to like be a representative, it could be a bit frustrating, and also I found it a bit confusing because if you
Mm.
explain, then you have to explain everything. You know what I mean? Like
But
there's no
that's
limit. Yeah.
that's very interesting though. But
Yeah.
question, do you
Yeah.
think it's a pressure? Do you think it's actually an expectation from people, or is it an expectation from yourself?
Mm.
Because yeah,
Mm.
I
That's
I
a
don't think
good.
it's an expectation from people.
Right. That's a good
I think
question.
it's just
Yeah.
an expectation from yourself to do the best
Yeah.
that you can to honestly
Exactly.
represent something, because you
Yeah.
internally will, I think all of us know,
Right.
hopefully, well, at least I think I can speak for both of us to say, I think we
Yeah.
know the privileges we carry or have a fairly
Hmm.
good idea of them.
Right.
And so, and I think for both of us, it is important
Hmm.
to acknowledge those privileges and to,
Right.
and we have enough of a know-how of our own countries where
Hmm.
we know our own deficiencies when it comes to
Yeah.
representing our countries. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
I I wonder if it's more of like the pressure that we bring on ourselves to do an
Hmm.
accurate.
Yeah. I think that just might
Yeah.
be it because you
Yeah.
don't want
I
to
don't
like
think people
misinform.
I don't think people are thinking that much when they ask, "Oh, so what food do you eat?"
Right. And you're like, oh my God, there's so much to talk
There's
about.
so many foods. Which cuisine?
I know. And you're right, because I feel like it's a pressure that we put on ourselves because we don't want to like misinform people or give them
Hmm.
the wrong impression.
Exactly.
Or like, feel like we didn't say enough about this thing, and I think that's the pressure a lot of international students face, to be honest,
Yeah.
to like say as much as they can, and if they don't know it, like to do the research, so then the next time
Yeah.
someone
Yes.
asks them,
They
they
know
know
all
the
the
answer.
nuanced answers. They can write a little thesis for you out loud.
I know. And do you relate with that though? Do you feel the pressure to like talk about everything when people ask you questions about where you're from?
I think I do feel the pressure. I
Right.
100%, I think I do feel the pressure. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, I think my reaction to it usually is to just like shut my mouth and not say anything at all,
Uh-huh.
instead of saying things that could potentially be,
Mm-hmm.
just one sided or not nuanced enough and all of that. So I think my reaction a lot of the times in Smith was to just be quieter. um,
Mm-hmm.
However, with my close friends, I would have the conversation. I think that's an
Right.
important distinction. Like, there were people with whom I would value having that conversation where I felt safe enough that nobody is taking my word as the Bible. Like everybody knows
Mm,
that I am also having
right.
a self discovery journey as I say all
Mm,
of these things out loud. And,
okay.
a lot of the times my friends it just so happened that they were also international folks. So they understood
Mhm,
that um, all of us are doing this for the first time, where we're putting our scripts together for our country, for our religion, for all of this stuff.
mhm,
Um, but with the average, like, and this includes professors, right? Like this,
mhm. Yeah, it includes professors. Yeah.
it includes professors, includes people who I would meet out on the campus. I would
Right.
not offer very much information about myself.
Mm,
But with my friends, I would, because I would feel safe enough to be
mhm.
like, they know that this is not the most nuanced answer or the best answer, and they know all of that stuff. But
Right.
yeah, with the random person, I was just like, I don't want to upset myself by giving you like a one-sided answer, and then I'm just gonna sit here for like 2 hours being like, shit, here's like all of the things I should have said, and here's the
Right.
things I don't know about, and like,
Mm.
so yeah.
Right. No, no, that makes sense totally. And I really want to touch upon what you said about, having those friends where you feel comfortable to share your opinions with without the fear of being judged, or like,
Mhm.
they also share your frustration, they also share your experience, as international students. And I also want to ask you, like, how did that, like, how did finding people that that you were close with, like having those
Mm.
close friends, how did that how was that dictated by your identity?
I think this is a very interesting question, because I think I've
Mhm.
been reflecting more so on it in the past, like since I've graduated. So I
Okay.
graduated in 2020 from
Right.
Smith, into the pandemic, and so there was a
Right.
lot of time to just sit around and think.
Right.
As I think most people had that same experience.
Yeah. By
But
the way,
I,
sorry to interrupt you, but I just
yeah,
want to say, kudos for like graduating during COVID, because
it
I have no idea how you did that, and I'm in awe of you.
I honestly think shout out to the class of 2021 or
Oh my god.
beyond, because they definitely had it probably worse, I
Right.
think. At
Right.
least for us, we only had to really deal with what, like 2 months of COVID
Mm.
classes.
Right, right.
Um,
But still.
but for to do a whole school year online is a lot. And obviously, I mean, I think for us, the class of 2020, I would say the economy and like jobs was quite
Mm.
stressful then, because a lot of
Mm.
friends of mine had to deal with offers being rescinded and like just
Right.
having to figure it all out again, so that was
Yeah.
very stressful. So
Yes.
I hope the 2020 kiddies are recovering
I
from
hope so
our
too.
collective difficult moment.
I know, I know.
um
Yeah, okay. Sorry. Okay,
but
go
yeah,
back. Hmm.
so how did my like friend circles, and how did that was your question, right?
Right. How did your identity kind of inform or dictate the way you were able to find your close friends?
um so starting at Smith, I think the international part was the first time you make friends, right? Like, okay, we're
Yeah.
international, we're different than
Right.
these Americans. Let's just
Let's
band
stick
together
together.
and like we'll figure out how the laundry machine works.
Yes.
Um,
I love that.
Something like that. And then
Hmm.
after that, I think for me, I didn't even realize I was making friends this way, but
Right.
I had a conversation with a friend recently where I arrived at the conclusion that, oh, all of my friends at Smith not only were they international, but they also came from, a family that placed some emphasis on organized religion,
Mm.
a family that placed some amount of importance on like personal finance and like
Mm.
how to manage money and how to be
Mm.
conservative in your spending, how to be frugal, how to live with less, how
Yeah.
like those kinds of family values that you grow
Yeah.
up with, right? Like certain
Right.
people have different relationships with money. So I saw
Right.
that showing up in my friendships a
Mm.
lot, where everybody had certain same
Yeah.
like parenting, like their parents had instilled in them like, don't
Mm.
spend money on like nonsense things, like think very hard about how you
Yeah.
spend your money, and like that was
Right.
the thing.
Mhm.
It was often folks who, again, with this money thing, they were often folks who were also on financial aid, and that was
Yes.
a big part of like
Mm.
my, I wouldn't say part of my identity, but it was a big part of like my life at Smith. And
Yeah.
so that informed a lot of who who I felt safe surrounded with, in the
Right.
sense of they know my experience and they will
Mm.
have similar considerations to me when they make their choices at Smith. So the
Right.
financial aid and like having friends who had, parents who instilled similar
Mhm.
values about money in them, who
Mhm.
had some sense of organized religion and what that looks like.
Mhm.
Um, Also, just I think people who enjoyed a lot of music, who enjoyed a lot of
Yeah.
laughter, who liked,
Yeah.
like, who weren't very, I don't like, not the word uptight, but who
Mm.
have a good sense of the world and hence a good sense of humor. Because for me,
Uh-huh.
I think having a good sense of the world is very important. To have a good sense of, like, I think those two things are linked. If you are an
Wow.
ignorant person cracking jokes, that really, really upsets me. And I don't think you're
Right.
cracking a joke. I think you're just spouting your opinions in like an up and down cadence, and that's just
Yeah.
disturbing. But if you have a good sense of the world, you're able to crack jokes and I can laugh with you instead of thinking you're laughing
Mm.
at me.
I
That
love
was
that.
very
Yeah.
important. I think all of my friends at Smith were very funny. So I give them
Yes.
that. They made me laugh for
I
hours.
love, yeah.
So I think having a similar amount of, okay, this is what we know about the world. This is what we're about to discover about the world. And
Mm.
that, I think we all were in the same sort of boat of
Mm.
how worldly we all were, how
Mm.
cultured or informed.
Right. Right.
Um, so that was a big part of it. I think a lot of us were just like econ and like data
Yeah.
science majors and stuff like
Right.
that. So
Right.
that's just, I don't know how to
Yeah.
explain immigrant life's mindsets, but that's a little bit of what's going
Yep.
on there, I think.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think that's the big ones where I hadn't
Mm.
actually reflected on a lot of like, what, how did I even become friends with
Yeah.
these people? And then I'm like,
Right.
oh, because
Yeah.
we would laugh together a lot. Like we have the same sense of humor.
Yeah.
Or we,
Yeah.
even if we don't listen to the same music, because I don't think I listened to any Afro beats before I met most of my friends at Smith.
Right.
But I
Right.
think most people can agree South Asians have an appreciation for beats. And so I was like, okay, I can get with
Great.
rhythms, I can get with beats.
Right.
So
Right.
I
Yeah.
love discovering music. And I think the friends
Mm-hmm.
I found also love discovering music. And so
Right.
I introduced them to a lot of music. They introduced me to their
Mm-hmm.
music. So that was a
Mm-hmm.
very important part of how I made these
Right.
friends.
Right.
Um, I think those are the big ones. I can't think of
Mm.
anything else right now. Yeah.
No, yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And I'm like, every time you were talking, I was just like nodding because I could relate to absolutely everything that you were saying. And it just made me think about, how the people you surround yourself with, especially like during times of challenges, or like obviously college is
Mm,
not easy. Like we've all
mm.
had our fair share of, challenges that we
Moments.
had, and
Our
moments,
moments.
right? We've had a lot of moments. And I started thinking about, like, the people that you surround yourself with. Is it like, does your mind even like automatically like says, okay, this person is my friend, because you're in survival mode, like all of a sudden you identify someone also struggling like you.
Hmm.
It's not just school, like social stuff even. And then you're like, okay, we have to like to stick together. I mean,
Yeah.
this is like scientific almost, right? I'm sure
Yeah.
there's like a research that says like, if we
I think
stick
it's
together
something
we
about
can
in
survive.
groups and out groups and like who you align with. And then you just
Exactly.
form a community bond with them and you feel like, I'll protect
Exactly.
them, they'll protect me. Yeah. 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 Yep.
Exactly. And I think that also played a big role in my life, where I like, made friendships with people, and we stuck together, through really hard times
Yeah.
in college. And you get to share your, trials and, experiences, and then you share advice, and then you see how they're going through it.
Hmm.
So what I wanted to say was, like, as being an international student, your identity plays a lot in the decisions that you make, in the
Hmm.
friendships that you choose. Which friends do I want to invest in? Because you can make a
Yeah.
lot of friends, but you can have like really really quality, like handful friends. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So yeah,
I
so
think,
like the
yeah, I think you
yeah.
trust you. Another thing that came to mind when you said that you find people who are going through the same struggles, right? Or
Right.
who have to make the same sets of decisions as you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think for me, it was a great source of like, I could rely on my friends because I
Mm.
knew that they were going through the same trajectories of
Yeah.
discovery as me.
Right.
Because I
Right.
knew that even if they're coming from different paths, their values are aligned with who I am. And so I can learn from what they are considering when they make
Right.
important decisions in their
Right.
life,
Right.
instead of being surrounded with people who I have nothing in common with. And so the
Yeah.
sets of choices for them are very different. Like I could never, like I
Mm.
can be there for them, I can be
Right.
like, and this is not to say just band together with people who you
Right.
relate
Right.
to. Like I
Right.
think there's a
Of
lot of
course.
learning and
Of
um,
course.
being around people who have nothing in common with you,
Mm-hmm.
but you can be like a support system for them. You can be, encourage, you can offer encouragement, you can cheer for them, all of those things. But I think it was very important for me from a learning perspective to be surrounded with people who I have some commonalities with, because then when they make decisions, I'm like, okay, would I make a similar decision? Would I make a different decision?
Mm-hmm.
If I make a different decision, why is that? Like,
Right.
if I see, like some of my friends were, I don't know, like neuroscience majors or computer science majors. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, like, is that something I could pursue? Because they were
Mm-hmm.
thinking of it from not only just an interest point of view, but also
Right.
from like, oh, as an international, there are certain legal considerations for us
Mm-hmm.
after college. And they
Right.
are placing more emphasis on like, well, this is a definitely employable career for the next
Right.
five, like that's what the job market we see.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely gets you those certain legal stamps that you need to
Mm-hmm.
get in order to
Right.
elongate your period in the country
Right.
before you decide whether you want to go to grad school or not. I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
those are big life decisions. Those are some of the
Yeah.
first big life decisions you have to make, right?
Yeah.
About your future path.
Yeah, for sure.
And so you're like, okay, how would I do this?
Yeah.
And so seeing people make those decisions with the same sort of mindsets
Mm-hmm.
is was helpful. It was very helpful for
Right.
me to start,
Right.
going through those same mental exercises for myself, and then being like,
Yeah.
okay, this feels right. Okay, this doesn't feel right.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, for sure. I totally agree with what you're saying. It makes total sense to me. And thank you also for sharing that. And I also wanted to ask you, like, if thinking back at your college experience, like, would you, like, do you think, would you have been like a different person if you did not have to like identify with your particular identity, or like had that experience in college as an international student?
So if I was not an international at Smith, would I
Yeah.
have had a different experience?
Or would
This,
you think like you would have been like, um okay, what am I trying to say? Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, let me rephrase the question. So what I'm trying to say is, do you think if you didn't go to Smith, it doesn't have to be Smith actually, if you didn't
mm,
study abroad,
mm.
do you think if you did not study abroad, you would be the person that you are today, in terms of like, the self-reflecting that you're doing, in terms of like your opinion about the world,
Mm.
and basically your personality?
Um, I mean, my personality would 100% be different.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like none of these are bad things, because
Right.
for me, I think I've always carried in my head the two realities for a long time, that I could go abroad or I could not go abroad, because it's very expensive to
Mm-hmm.
go abroad.
Yeah.
And I was only able to go because, the funding and everything worked
Financially.
out.
Right. Right.
So for the longest time in my head, I was just like, because I applied to colleges in Pakistan and
Right.
got in, and I was gonna
Right.
be. So the first thing is I was probably gonna be a lawyer. So
Whoa! I didn't know
if I had
that.
not come to Smith, I would probably have been a lawyer. So
Oh my
that's a
god.
very different thing. So I'm sure that would have had some impact on my personality. Um,
Right.
in terms of self reflection, though, I think I would like to think I would have probably self reflected just as
Okay.
hard, because that's just
Right.
the kind of person I am.
Oh,
Uh,
wow, look at you. Okay.
but I
Yeah.
probably would have reached different conclusions, because
Mm.
obviously the choices offered to you are different, right? Like if you stay
Yeah.
home, I
Yeah.
might have had a much more, I don't know, I would have probably had like very up close experience with a lot of the problems that are happening at home. So I would probably have stronger opinions about
Right.
those. And
Mm-hmm.
right now, I feel like because I've had distance from those problems, I don't have as strong opinions about them, because I just don't think I have enough information to, say anything about a lot of issues at home. So I would have probably had a lot more, yes, the same amount of self reflection, but about different choices and different things.
Mm.
So growth in
Mm.
different areas, probably. So I would look a little bit
Exactly.
different, but
Yeah.
hopefully the essence of it would have been the same.
Oh, I love that answer, honestly. I mean, because, the reason why I asked you that is I asked that question to myself also, because I also have friends who, have stayed in Ethiopia, went to, university here, and
Mhm.
then now have jobs. And we talk and we reflect about our experiences. And for me personally, I think, like, having moved to a different country at a very young age, and then, staying there for college, I think if I had stayed in Ethiopia, I would be a completely different person, honestly.
Mm.
In terms of like
Yeah.
how I interact with people, in terms of like how I see the world. Like I've had, the privilege and the experience of like, moving and traveling and living in a different country and being friends with different kinds of people. That
Yeah.
has made me open-minded. A lot of the disagreements that I have now here with my friends is that, we talk about something and I have a completely different opinion about it. Or I'm
Yeah.
just like, okay, but have you thought of it this way? And then they're like,
True.
yeah, but like this is
That's
right, this
very
is
true.
wrong, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
I almost wonder. I think you're right. I think that would probably have been true. I was initially going to say that maybe that
Mm,
has something to do very specifically with the Smith experience, but then
right.
I'm like, no. I think
Yeah.
I think since graduating, I've met a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
from various different
Right.
universities who
Right.
probably, if they went home, would have
Mm-hmm.
very different opinions and very different
Yeah.
conversations with their friends and like very
Yeah.
different friction points, simply
Exactly.
because they have
Exactly.
lived outside and met so many
Yeah.
different people and have had to
Yeah.
make all of the choices
Yeah.
um, that we have to make here.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, regardless of wherever you
Mm,
study, if you
right.
go off into another
Mm-hmm.
country at a young age, you will
Yeah.
definitely have different opinions than people who
Yeah.
have stayed in the same environment
Exactly.
for most of their lives.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's also one of the reasons why I I'm doing this podcast also, is because to like, hear about other people's stories and how they have navigated their college experience as an international student, and how it relates to their own person as an individual, because
Mm.
everyone has a different story and the way you interact with people is very different. And yeah, so yeah, anyways, okay. So is there anything that I didn't ask you but you wanted to share?
Um, I think for those who are in college right now or who are planning to apply to college and especially come to a different country and apply to college, like that whole experience,
Yeah.
they, I think, just be patient with yourself. It
Mm,
is a very, it's a very, honestly, I think sometimes it can feel very scary because for me,
mhm,
I placed a lot of importance and a lot of confidence in knowing who I am and my sense of
mm,
self. I draw a lot of confidence from that, and that, like, I know who I am and I
yeah,
know how I would behave in XYZ situation, what my values
yeah,
are.
yeah,
Um, and for me, I've faced in the recent past very scary moments of I'm like, maybe I
mm,
don't know who I am, or maybe like, this,
mm,
my opinion is changing about something. And I
yeah,
think it can feel scary, but
yeah,
it's not a bad thing.
yeah.
And you should not shy away from having difficult conversations with yourself. I'm not saying go out on the street and like engage with all of the thoughts all of your intrusive thoughts, but
Right.
nothing's hurting you from sitting in your room. And like, if you feel differently about things over time, just let yourself think through all of those options,
Mhm.
because your identity is it's going to shift, it's going to
Yeah,
change, it's going to evolve, and that's how it
yeah,
should be. You should feel changes, you should feel like you are learning more and more about yourself as you go through life. So don't be scared, don't shy away from those conversations with yourself. It is a process, it takes a lot of time,
yeah,
and it honestly feels like a roller coaster of it when you're going through college, because there's just an influx of information, there's an influx of
mhm,
people, it's an influx of new experiences, so you are bound to have moments of like, not crisis, but moments of like big revelations for yourself, where you
mhm,
will learn a lot of things about yourself. So
yeah,
um, don't be scared of it. Like, it's okay, embrace it, um,
mhm.
and you will 100% come out, better at the end of it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that so much, Zoya. That was really, really good. Honestly, I wish I heard that advice while I was starting my college career, because it would have been like very, very helpful to even like hear it from
Mhm.
someone who's been through it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what you said. And in terms of like, identity, I really love what you said about how it's always changing and how it's always,
Mhm.
morphing, because um, you know, one time you're identifying as this, and then the next time you might not
Yeah.
be. So, and the places, the people that you meet are going to change. Like college is not
Yeah.
permanent. Obviously we have graduated, so
Yeah.
it's temporary, right? And so
Yeah.
yeah,
And
I mean,
it's not even that
yeah,
big. And like, I say these words like, it's like, oh my God, like, oh, I don't believe in God anymore. It's not like that. It's literally like,
right,
for the
right,
longest
right,
time in my life, I hated tomatoes. And now I'm like, I think I could eat tomatoes. And like
Yeah.
it's always been such an important part because people are like, do you want
Yeah.
tomatoes in your burger? I'm like, never.
Never.
Absolutely not. That's not who I am. And now I'm like, "Ah, it's okay.
Why not?
You can put tomato
Exactly.
in there. Never in
Wow.
my life, Ruth. And so that's also what I mean when I say identity. Don't take
Yeah.
yourself too seriously. Like
Exactly.
don't be fixed
Yeah.
in your
Yeah.
don't be
Yeah.
fixed in the way you do things, especially when
Mm,
you're coming to college. And when you're in
yeah.
college, you're
Yeah.
too young to have like, oh, I don't like,
Right.
I don't know, I don't do group hangs. I only do like one-on-one friends. Oh, I only do group hangs. I can't handle the intimacy of one-on-one friends. Like don't put yourself in all of these boxes.
Right.
Just
Right.
relax and try new
Yes.
things, and you will
Yes.
you will learn like within bounds. Like don't do dangerous things,
Yeah.
but um,
Of course.
that's
Yeah.
also what I mean. Like don't take yourself too
Mm,
seriously. None of your opinions and like nothing is fixed.
yeah. It's
Have
not.
faith in yourself, have faith in what is
Yeah.
important to you, and trust yourself. Like I know what is important to myself, and I will, I will center those things in my life, but there are things
Mm-hmm.
that will shift about me, and that's okay. You're right. There's not any like, you're not getting extra points for staying the same and consistent all your life.
Yes.
That's okay. Like I
Yes.
know consistency is key, but
Mm-hmm.
growth is also important.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
I love that. I love that. And I'm just gonna say one last thing. From what you said, I really relate to that because sometimes our upbringing could make us think in a very rigid way, and when we like divert from that thinking, we might think, oh my god, I'm not myself anymore. But I
yeah,
think we learn through our different experiences to be comfortable with changing,
yep,
to be comfortable with just change itself,
exactly,
right?
exactly. Yep.
So I think that's a very, very huge lesson, honestly. But yeah, and with that, we end a wonderful conversation about identity with Zoya. Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so
this
much, Ruth, for
wonderful
having me.
conversation. Yeah, of course. So just last minute
Mm,
housekeeping. Please make sure to go follow the official Instagram page at Internationalie by Ruth. That is LIE, and send an email with your questions and concerns about being an international student to Internationalie by Ruth at gmail.com. Thank you again for tuning in today. Hope you have a lovely week ahead of you and take care of yourselves, everyone.
all right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.